here. Let me bring in Brandon Arnold. He's Executive Vice President at the National Taxpayers Union. Um, you look at what Donald Trump is doing here. When Trump said we don't need their timber, we don't need their dairy, we don't need their energy. The truth is we pay farmers not to farm. We cut our supply and then purchase some of it from Canada. They don't even allow American timber and dairy into Canada. So if Canada really wants to play this game and not be a good trade partner and neighbor, all right, bring it on.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't really like tariffs. I don't like trade wars, but you're right. I mean, there are some problems within Canada that need to be addressed that probably should have been addressed in the USMCA a few years ago. They have been very protective of their lumber industry, very protective of their dairy markets, as you point out, and they need to open those up. That being said, I think if we get into this escalating trade war, you're right. Canada has more at stake. We have more chips to push onto the table, into the pot, but at the same time, we're still going to be hurt, particularly states that are engaging in a lot of commerce with Canada, our northern states. So we're going to be hurt. They'll be hurt worse, but we will be hurt some. And particularly when we're fighting a trade war on multiple fronts, we could get dinged pretty hard in the process.
I don't like tariffs either. But the truth is a lot of the things that we import, we also make. So beer, spirits, oil, cars, you name it. When it comes to coffee, perhaps with Colombia, we all love the Juan Valdez commercials from I think they were the 80s or early 90s. But Africa is coffee rich. The Caribbean is coffee. We can get coffee pretty much anywhere. Our suppliers, if they see a 25% tariff on Colombian beans, they're just going to source out to another nation that doesn't have to pay that tariff. And that's where Trump wins. But really what he's saying is, I want you to be a good neighbor and a good trade partner. If you've been tariffing us all this time, I thought we had free trade. The fact that he is using this to get these leaders to just be the fair trade partners they were supposed to be, I mean, I guess it's gone on so long that this seems like a shock to a lot of people, even though it's what we should have done 20-something years ago.
Well, I mean, globally, we have been a leader in international trade, and we've lowered worldwide tariffs through our leadership for decades and decades. And right now, the average global tariff is less than 3%. There aren't really those high tariffs that you're hearing about here and there in little pockets. Where they exist, absolutely, we should lower them, and we should do so aggressively when necessary. But I don't think the world is quite as tilted as some might have you believe. And I also, going back to your earlier point, switching supply chains is more complicated than it is just going to the grocery store and picking one box of cereal versus another box of cereal. A lot of times, retail stores and other businesses have long-term contracts set up with certain suppliers in different countries. So those tariffs can be very, very disruptive. It's not a matter of just making that switch quickly in every instance. Sometimes we're just going to have to suffer and pay those tariffs, which is why I do think tariffs would raise prices in this country. Again, it wouldn't bring us to our knees. It wouldn't cause a recession. But because Americans elected Donald Trump to lower prices, I think a lot of people are going to be frustrated if prices start moving in the opposite direction.
Could he use it as leverage to get rid of the income tax? I mean, the 16th Amendment says that they can levy income taxes. It doesn't say they have to.
Yeah, I don't think that's really plausible. And, never do math on TV, but I'll do a little bit of math on TV. There are a total of $4 trillion of imports into this country. Let's say we applied 100% tariff to those $4 trillion. Obviously, we bring in $4 trillion in revenue. Problem is, the federal budget right now is $6.75 trillion. So we'd start off right away with a $2.75 trillion deficit, even bigger than what we've experienced under Joe Biden. And then as these tariffs take effect, people would buy fewer imported goods. That can be a good thing, but it would also necessarily reduce revenue. So that budget deficit would continue to grow, and we'd have even worse red ink than we had under Biden and Obama and other reckless spending presidents.
Well, look, if we would have to replace the income tax with something else. I mean, Florida, New Hampshire, Texas, they run their states without any income tax, and their budgets are just fine versus the huge deficits you see in places like California and, the ridiculous spending that you have in New Jersey. You make everyone a taxpayer. then people are more attuned to what the government's doing with their money and the threat of future tax raises. So conceivably, and I'm sure there's a constitutional question that would have to be answered before they would levy a VAT tax or a national sales tax, which I also like the idea of that paying taxes anonymously. The government has no proven interest in knowing how much an individual earns each year. If you were to pay a sales tax, you would pay that sales tax anonymously. The business would collect it and pass it on to the Treasury Department. But a hybrid mix of tariffs and sales tax versus the income tax, that would also get rid of class warfare. But that's a discussion for another day. I don't think Trump is just saying, let's tariff these products and pass it on. I think he's looking for ways to offset it. But also, really, none of these tariffs have gone into place because the foreign leaders he's dealt with have come to their senses very quickly. I got 40 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that'll continue. Hopefully these negotiations will de-escalate the trade war, because if it ends up taking effect and we're fighting a trade war with Mexico, Canada, China, the EU, Australia, and so forth, that's when prices really start to rise. And again, that could endanger Trump's political capital and his ability to get other bills across the finish line if his approval numbers start to plummet and he loses the ability to muscle Congress into getting good policy across the finish line.
Well, again, all he's asking is our trade partners to be fair and consistent, right? Just because they've gotten accustomed to having better deals than they should have had doesn't mean they shouldn't be changed. And let's have that discussion going forward about maybe scrapping the income tax. I got to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.